I am CouchScoop and welcome to a very special comparison video. We're looking at 3 old school Assassin's Creed games. Mirage has just come out. There's a lot of talk about the OG Assassin's Creed essence. I'm also celebrating because my Origins video, Assassin's Creed Origins video, has just hit 1,000 views. Very proud of that. 2 of these games I have a blind spot on, so let's crack on. We are going to do some direct comparisons, but I want to start chronologically with where they're set in their sort of period. And Black Flag is 16th century. This is a sort of Caribbean pirate tale, and a very good one at that. Black Flag has also just hit 10 years old. 2013, I was gobsmacked when I saw the date myself, and it is also not getting any major PlayStation 5 boosts. I will put it in the title, but all of this is PlayStation 5 footage. I did want to see what sort of ancient backwards compatibility was around. Turns out we got 900p and 30 frames per second. All of these games can be looked upon over on PC at better specs, but I want to cover the PlayStation 5 area. But these seas and beaches are still as good as I remember them. It really hit home, this game, with its open world ocean format, and it was the best looking sea right up until Sea of Thieves. I even put this game in a video about top water in video games. The Witcher 3 won that one, but this is a sea as opposed to a river or lake. It all got quite complicated. My point being, younger Assassin's Creed fans may not realise that Black Flag was the first installation of that boat, the boat that appears in Odyssey and some of the mechanics in Origin, and you see it in Valhalla. It's kind of a staple when they roll out Assassin's Creed games now, but this was the brand new first place you could find it. All of these games as well did not get the memo about going to the stupid office and coming out of the sort of animus or whatever it is and walking around like the boring IRL. What? Who keeps asking for that? Who says can't wait for the new Assassin's Creed game, for those bits that you get when you climb out of that machine? No one says this. This was particularly embarrassing because it's just a bit weird. This is before Ubisoft's, kick off with bad HR policies, let's just say.
Abstergo Entertainment has been a studio for a few years.
But it's not actually too painful and relatively short. Let's get back into the what I call day-to-day, and that's looking at the towns, looking at the ports, looking at the combat, the visuals. I kind of love the way this game looks. I love its sky colour contrasted with the sea. It was really beautiful back in 2013 and still raises an eyebrow now. It's also got some quite dated mechanics, one of which being to hire a group of dancers to sort of distract the enemy. Those animations haven't aged too well.
Keen to meet them?
No, goodness no, I'm a married man.
Married man of their forte, mate.
It's interesting to see the differences in crowd numbers between these 3 games. This Caribbean setup doesn't have that hugely populated cities against something like Paris in Unity, but I do love the architecture and colours used, and again, it doesn't really need to have big flooded huge gathering points. This game's all about quite sparse, separate, different places of population. Also huge on using some of the older mechanics. You see some of the listing stuff in the new material, but it was a lot more predominant in early Assassin's Creed games. So the following around, the blending in with the crowds, they played around with these ideas, and they also played around with the controls. Notice that there isn't exactly a sneak or crouch. With this, you have to get up to cover in order to be not seen, or go to a bit of bush. Sorry. It was also deemed very stylish with the camera slowdown when you come in for that assassination from above, and a lot of the animations on death and fighting were a lot more choreographed. I remember being extremely impressed with how the camera work came in nice and close when you got in a fight. The sword playing and the counter buttons, it all just sort of trickled off itself. It was very cool. I'm actually testing pop in here. You can see there is some granular additions to some of the NPCs in the far distance, but it kind of coped with me herring around that populated town quite quickly, extremely well, I feel. Each one of these games has got like a gimmick. It's got like a sort of party trick. And one of the main things for Black Flag are the pirate ships and sort of dealing with naval ships from that era. Getting the look at the back of that colossal wooden craft of death is truly amazing, and I will never forget the first time playing this game and looking at all the rigs and the ship designs. It was truly a jaw opener. Is it that impressive still to this day? It kind of is, because Ubisoft haven't come out with a decent pirate game since, and Odyssey and all the new ones, they kind of fall a bit flat against the in-depth ship mechanics we saw on this. By the way, this century encompasses the invention of gunpowder. Look at this, blowing it dry. That NPC also suffered the indignity of waiting for me to do that. This is the wall hug / stealth mechanic at play here. Most Assassin's Creed have a dedicated button to go into crouch or go into stealth, but with this it's kind of hug the wall and then you get an opportunity to assassinate as they come around the corner. Kudos for still keeping the dual assassinations in. The ship-to-ship stuff is also pretty amazing, and if you've played Odyssey, this is where it started with that boarding mechanic. You can Goonies style swing on a rope over and just murder everyone on ship. You have a number you've got to get round in order to take it over, and you have a choice about whether to enslave everyone or put the commodities in your ship, even a repair. It's pretty amazing when you first get given the jackdaw. Is it called? Fuck. Yeah, I just checked it. It's okay.
Brace for impact!
The freak waves and cyclones as actual hazardous icons on your map were also really cool. You've got to get broadside and get away, or go straight through the middle, hunker down to take the damage. And when the sun starts coming out or things start changing with the weather, you realise you're witnessing quite a big piece of tech for 2013.
And just nearby, 2 barrels of gunpowder, closer than man and wife. Fit to explode at the touch of a spark.
We'll stow ours good and proper.
As for the cannons, they might as well be tossed.
I'll probably get copywritten for that shanty song, which are collectibles. I did want to talk about its unbelievably eye-watering gratuitous violence, which is friggin' amazing. You will not hold back on the death moves, and they're very well randomized, and of course the camera is so deep on its zoom level. Let's talk ship-to-ship stuff whilst we're on the combat subject, and it's brilliant, works very well. You can fire from the front, you feel like you've got full control of your vessel itself with different speeds, tighter turning angles, and brilliant AI and a ship ranking on what you can take on, and there's big commodities and rewards for going for high-ranked ships. That's a really addictive element to this game, and they've woven it right into Odyssey, giving you an almost identical system out on the water. But it's once you get on these ships where things become very interesting. You're in a confined space, you get quite high-ranked NPCs to fight. You've also got your men with you who can die, and the whole thing can go wrong because they're focusing on you and not your crew. It's quite complicated, and I like the idea of it being confined, having to use the edge and pull in your own ship, even fire from your ship to relieve some of that manpower to deal with once you finally jump in. This is also the Creed that gives you so many follow quests, so many catch the thief quests, it's ridiculous. It also has loads of those hide in a bush, wait for the guy to walk past, and they do the obligatory "what's the time, Mr. Wolf?" and look around behind because the game wants you to make sure you're in cover. It's so predictable, but it is a game model I've kind of drawn to love. For some reason I get sucked into these games, and they're so massive and there's so much to do and see in the history. But the problem with the older ones is they've got a very fiddly UI. So it's the directional buttons that choose things. One of them's triangle to select, one that is not, one that scan is triangle, one's R3, and you just spend so much time stealthing and end up doing something like this. So next up we do have Unity, and what's the party trick with this game? Well, that's quite a hard one to fathom, but I think it's disguise and crowds. Now you've got to remember, we're now walking into the era of Assassin's Creeds being online co-op games. Not something I was a big fan of. Crazy story. when I lived out in the Middle East, I met this guy at an advertising agency. We got talking about video games, and I was like, wow, what do you play? And this was out, and he only played this online competitively with the teammate and people walking around, crowds with like funny masks on, and it baffled me. But the one player is actually something I never got to look at, and it was my opportunity this week. This one's got the weirdest update story also. This is pre-update footage, okay? Once the big recent modern update goes in on your PlayStation 5, it takes it down from 60 frames per second to 30 and doesn't adjust that resolution. So it's one of them. If you don't want to see this game with that 30 frames and pre-patch, don't install them. But do you remember the ridicule Ubisoft got off this from launch? There was people with their heads inside out, none of it worked. But to tell you the truth, looking back at it now and after that patch, it's a game that deals with more crowds than I've actually seen in an open world game in my life. When you look back at Night City and Cyberpunk, the early days, it's laughable what they were doing.
You shall be cast!
It's also the most pompous Assassin's Creed. The protagonist is by far one of the most annoying for me that I've come across so far. It's just too uppity and just posh. It's quite hard to take on board now. Get this about the year. It's 1766. That rings a bell, right? There was a lot of revolutions going on. There was one across the pond with rifles, little one that you might remember. So very interesting stuff. Also, you might not be able to see it, but top right of screen, you can see that crowd of people. This game was so sort of massive on trying to get as many NPCs out on screen as possible. You can see their idle animations are all perfectly lined up. It's a crazy looking thing. I spotted a lot of that in this, but it's kind of take it on the chin because it's really trying something massive. Showing you Paris in this century is mind-blowing, and of course we have the Notre Dame building in it.
What do you expect?
It also features the Parisian catacombs in not as much detail as I would like to see. There's a few quite darkened missions where you're looking for cultists and burrowing in some of that infrastructure beneath the city. But as a contrast, you also get to look inside the interiors of some of the greatest religious buildings inside that capital. Absolutely magnificent seeing this much detail on some of these buildings which aren't technically around anymore. We'll get to that in a second. It's also one of the more trippy Assassin's Creed with some of its like quite hedonistic cutscenes and strange nightmare visions. It's really off the hook with what it's trying to show you on some dreamscape angles. It does pull you a little bit from its immersion and pristine, almost Renaissance vibe. There was a lot of opium around back then, to be fair. Yeah, we're not really bothered about all that, mate. What does it actually play like? Well, it's a work on Assassin's Creed Black Flag. What I mean by that is a step up. There is more detail in the combat, and they've sorted out that stealth issue, putting it over on L2, which is even weirder, and then having free run over on R2. And you've also got free run up and free run down, which very much complicates things. With modern Assassin's Creed, you just got to go forward, and if there's a way to go up, he'll take it. You get the choice here, and it does and doesn't work for me. These crowds do, however, and there's always something going on. It's quite a turbulent time for Paris, so every corner you walk round, there's a damn protest, there's people shouting on the street, there's flags burning. It's not too much change from now. So here's the cathedral in all its 17th century glory. What a building, and the back end of it. I mean, if Gaga was going to make a church, it would not look too dissimilar, right? And the interesting aspect of this section is that they've actually gone back to the designers of this map to look at the intricacies on the building itself. To reconstruction purposes, these guys mapped it all digitally, so it's all on their files, and they've dug it all back out after the fire. What a great thing. Also, and I had to play it again, look at the lack of popping on the crowd and just how fast this game processes when you jump off something like that and then move into a courtyard with this many people in it. CDPR, honestly, there was loads of occasions where I was thinking, what's going on with modern gaming? There's There's also not a lot, if anything, going on with the river, which I was pretty knocked back by. There might be a slightly more populated section of water towards endgame, but there was no traversable boats. It was just like dead, which was a real shock because we had so much activity in Black Flag. Let's have a slightly more in-depth look at that combat, and again we do have a luscious camera angle bringing it right in, and it's slower. All the animations are a lot slower than the newer games, and not having R2 and R1, i.e. only having one attack speed, is quite simplified, but it's cool with the counters. It always keeps coming up with new ones for you, and you can have break sections as well where enemies need their guard taken down, so there's a few layers. I was really concerned it was going to feel very two-dimensional against the newer games, but that's not the case. It also is one of the more stingy on outfit type, particularly in early game, but it makes up for it in combustible or projectile weapons and with loads of two-handed and single-handed choices. You can really go ham with the pistols. One of them's like a 4-shot blunderbuss, but the celebrity outfits or more big name outfits, like you've got the Iron Mask guy in there, you can even full on dress as Napoleon, I think. Back to the party trick thing, and you can full on unlock an ability that allows you to just appear as any character within the city itself. So you can pretend to be a cop, you could be a sort of harmless NPC to get through a gateway. You can't actually attack or do much as them, and if you stray too far it will reset itself, but it's still a very cool area to explore. Also alternative projectiles, poisons, stuff that sends people mad, that classic stuff's still in there. I think the madness of that campaign needs to be spoken about. It's by far the most outlandish sort of topic, time travel, crazy ideas campaign of all three of these games by a long stretch. You heard me mention those weird dream sequences, and just where it puts you and where, I'm not too sure it's needed. It is, though, for me, by a long, long way, one of the better looking Assassin's Creeds of that era. They've really gone all out on the palette and even given it a sort of washed out watercolour look in areas. All the plant boxes are decorated, every curtain, interiors are just off the hook, and his outfits are absolutely amazing. There's a guillotine gun in it, which is exactly what it says it is, a damn great shotgun with the big blade at the end that you swing around, and just walking up and down these streets as a complete badass doesn't really get boring with Unity. It's sticking with me, and I really enjoy it. It's just a shame we get these awful specs on the PS5. So it's now time for Syndicate, set in 18th century London, my town. I lived there 12 years, and a lot of those structures, it's unbelievable this, are still there. Like, half of Southwark looks identical. It's Spitalfields Market. It's a really crazy thing to be able to go in and through. Valhalla was also set in Suffolk and East Anglia, a place I'm also from, so cheers for that, Ubisoft. Boasting 1200p, right, but 30 frames per second still. But this is, again, a pretty damn populated city, not as massive as Unity on the numbers level. They probably learned a few lessons with that, but it's still pretty cool walking around, seeing the locals, hearing the voices, seeing the attire, and all these shop faces and high streets looking like they would have done back then in the 1800s. And of course we've got gunpowder, rifles, pistols. It's pretty cool with the equipment. Also skimpy on outfits as far as I'm concerned, early doors. What's the party trick with this one? Well, along with rideable carriages that go 120 miles an hour, you're also part of a brother and sister set, and there is one more thing that's coming up which I feel might have spoiled things a little bit, and it hasn't appeared since in the series. Equipment wise, it's all about knuckle dusters, flintlock pistols and walking sticks, so they've kept in canon with that there. I do like the idea of crafting, however that's pumped in here, and upgrading individual weapons if you take a shine to them. I wanted to just get back to the cities thing very quickly. If you've noticed, the Assassin's Creed series has moved away from massive metropolis cities only being the centerpiece of their game, and I really sort of miss that. So London's very welcome, Paris also, but of course with Black Flag we don't really see that huge section of metropolis. It's cool to be on top of the buildings, you know, it's nice to get some height and sort of run across everything in the Crow style. It's almost Dick Van Dyke Chimney in some places. Well, your starter outfit is these police. We need more of these in London at the moment. The fights you get in the NPCs, they're really aggressive, particularly the enemy ones, and their vision cones are massive. So you are constantly wandering into conflict, particularly if you haven't taken over sections of the map. That's what it's all about. It's more like a gangland, sort of think San Andreas endgame. Also unapologetically violent and close-ups and blood splatter everywhere. This is a very adult AC game. I do want to talk about these carriages really quickly. It's Night Ridge Race. It's unbelievable. They're so quick. You know, I've got times, world ranking times on Dirt Rally 2.0. I cannot go around the corners on these things, and the boost is just, it's not needed. They're already, these poor horses, already smashing into each other at 90 miles an hour. It also does nighttime brilliantly well, and smog and sort of cinder effects. This is the end of the Industrial Revolution. London's never been more dirty and polluted, and it's amazing. You can almost see Jack the Ripper scuttling around in there somewhere. The atmospherics on it are top notch, and that's the first thing that hits you on the resolution front, is that things are a hell of a lot crisper. This is blatantly a step up, and it is in the years that the game came out, this one being the most recent. You've also got like a hub train, which I love the idea of. It follows you around the map, so it's always really close to you. That's great. No more fast traveling all the way back to the other side of the map and vice versa, just to go and put on a new pair of boots. It's all happening right in this section that you're fighting or trying to take over. And it looks great. In the rain, Big Ben over there. Let's start talking about the river, because that was a real seller for me. It is easily the busiest stretch of water I've ever seen in an Assassin's Creed game, and that makes perfect sense. At the time there were kind of really no decent highways or motor vehicles to move this haulage around, so the river was like a goddamn dual carriageway. Absolutely awesome stuff. We'll look at it in a bit more detail in a second. We're looking at a Bloodborne scene here. This is the fight, the first boss of the game, I'm pretty sure. Those mist effects, the lamps, Sherlock Holmes. I mean, there's so much to love with the vibe of this game. There has to be a huge section of every Assassin's Creed game where I just look and walk around, see what everyone's doing, all the workshops, the vehicles, what the ships look like. It takes me ages, and I had so much fun doing it with this game, especially the Westminster section. Some of those areas no humans allowed to actually walk in now, and you can just, you know, murder all the guards and then go swimming in the River Thames. Life doesn't get much better than that. Okay, you ready for the ultimate AC trick that never appeared in any of the games since, and it is of course a Barnet Commando style winch, which completely cancels out any reason for really needing to wall run anywhere and allows you to go straight across the peaks of loads of things. It covers hundreds of meters. It is a bit soul destroying, but again, it makes the game quality of life a lot easier for this particular edition, because things are very far apart. There are very tall and high buildings to navigate, so it makes sense to put something like this in. It's just a weird one for me. It does kind of put me in a strange place with the game, because at the same time you can enjoy yourself from this winch and you could assassinate people you would never have the chance to by just setting up a rope that runs across the situation you want to dive into. But I can really understand why it didn't appear afterwards, and again, that could have been just a step too far on the traversal front, and you don't really want to ruin that parkour idea that made AC such a great gaming franchise in the first place, and I always get frightened of moving away from it. Think about the newest games, there's just areas that are swathes of nothing. Maybe a little bit of mountain, maybe a rock here and there, but it's not like you're in a hugely densely populated, high building, massive city. That's a bit of a rarity at the moment. That gun avoidance on triangle has different animations as well. You saw me just shoot the guy instead of duck the bullet. It feels very cool. You can chain loads of stuff up. This guy was supposed to give me another opportunity for a headbutt. He didn't produce. Had to go down. Which one of these games is my favourite of the three? Well, it would have to go Unity, Syndicate, Black Flag. That's in reverse order, Black Flag being the best of them, only because I've spent the most time with it, and because it also had the sort of introduction of a lot of groundbreaking mechanics that the Creed series still clings on to. There was a lot of trial and error with the other two games. Unity is by far the most beautiful, and it's probably my fault for not digging into that campaign enough as to where it is on my list. And Syndicate, I'm going to keep going with it. It hasn't bowled me over initially, but that London is so cool, and there's going to be some amazing stories in that awesome city it's depicted in. But if you want to see the daddy of all of this stuff we've been talking about, go and check out my Assassin's Creed Origins review, link in description, annotations, alright? I've been Couch Cube. Drop me a sub. I'll see you down there.